left Germany behind, built a life his way. Rachel, Nevada, dust and light, jets in the sky, no aliens inside. A hat in the wind, his pickup rolls, an iron will and a heart of gold. Dreamland Resort for 30 years strong, Area 51 is where he belongs. No hocus pocus, no fantasy, just hard cold facts, his legacy. Signals run wild, YouTube in his heart, camera live. The FBI came but they can't break him down. His fire keeps burning, it won't drown. A hat in the wind, his pickup rolls, an iron will. Legacy.
Howdy folks, here we are again for another live stream with Peter Merlin, and thank you all for tuning in. Special thanks to our channel members for their support. My producer texting me, let me check what my producer wants. Okay, my producer may be having PC issues, she says. Dragon Rose running the chat and moderating. She said she might have PC issues, and that's fine. Linda, you're excused if you have issues with the PC. I know how that goes. Sorry to hear that. Anyway, we're back to another live stream here with Peter Merlin. And of course, everybody knows Peter. He is an aviation historian who literally wrote the book on Area 51. And I don't know if Linda can post the link to the book. If not, it's in the description to the video. I'm seeing a lot of members already in the stream, and thanks for showing up. Thanks for showing your support. Thanks for supporting my channel, especially to the members. With less than the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can get the latest scoop on Area 51, become a member, and support my work. So please think about becoming a member of this channel. You get some inside scoop. And with that, thank you for Linda. Okay, there's the link. I think she posted. What is she saying? Just wasn't seeing anyone in the chat. I know that's impossible. Okay, I guess she's good now. All right. Well, you know, it's always technology and Murphy messing with us. So we're going for another hour. You know the drill, about 30 to 40 minutes. We're doing a presentation, and then we'll take questions and hopefully get to answer them all. And with that, let's see if I can find the right button here. Welcome, Peter Merlin, again, back to the stream.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for doing this. It's always a great show, and I think people are really interested in what you have to say. You probably know more than anyone else on the outside about Area 51. And like I said, you literally wrote the book about Area 51. And there it is.
And it's a big book, too.
And it is full of information.
I hear from people who order this book, and it weighs like, I don't know, it must weigh about 8 pounds. It's a big book, but it's full of really good information and hundreds of pictures and just a lot of amazing stuff.
Yeah, it really is the book on Area 51. It doesn't even matter if you're a beginner trying to find your way into the subject Area 51, or if you've already studied this for 20 some odd years like me, you will always still find something interesting in that book. I mean, I've been doing this for 25 plus years, and I've learned so much from your book, Peter, from reading it. It's unbelievable.
I tried to write the kind of book that I thought I would want to read if I wanted to learn everything there was to know about Area 51. So I was pretty happy with the way it came out.
It came out great, and it's like when I started reading it, it was really I'm there. I'm at Area 51. I'm experiencing the world of Area 51 through your book. So it's not a dry facts, and it really tells the story of Area 51.
I
So
I had heard so many stories. Area 51 was just this black hole of mystery, and I wanted to make it into a real place. I wanted people to be able to feel that it was something familiar, that was understandable, and that it was not just this dark hole of mystery.
right, and that it is. It's really an easily understandable, easy to relate to. And of course, one of the big projects at Area 51 was the A-12 spy plane, reconnaissance plane, whatever you want to call it, in the 1960s. We already talked about the project in the last live stream. If you all missed that part, you might want to catch up on that stream. It's still available in the live section of the channel. And today we want to talk about a few of the lesser known aspects of that program. I mean, a lot of people know the planes and all that good stuff, but we want to talk about a little bit behind the scenes stuff and the stuff that not everybody readily knows. And by the way, I see there's already some posts in the chat. What we usually do is we try to do our presentation, and if there's a pressing question, we might answer it, but pretty much do our presentation, and then in the second half, about 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes from now, we're going to start answering questions, and then we'll take nothing but your questions. So just so that you know, we will get to these questions. Just hold them until we're done with the presentation. So the first thing we want to talk about is, how did these A-12 get to Area 51? They didn't build them there.
Right. The airframes were constructed at the Lockheed plant in Burbank, California. It's located on the edge of Burbank Airport. And when they were pretty close to completion, the major subassemblies, the rear fuselage and engine nacelles and wings, the forward fuselage, these sections were boxed up in big wooden crates and loaded onto trucks. And they had to be driven all the way from Burbank to Area 51, which was a very complex process. They had a whole convoy of vehicles. There were security vehicles, there were pathfinder vehicles ahead of the main convoy. They had to make sure that the roads were clear, so they could control the traffic, make sure there weren't any obstacles in the way that could be, something that would impinge against the crates, which were oversized loads, to be sure. I mean, there are some pictures of this, and I've got some in my book, and there's a lot of them online. I think you have some on your website. And the Highway Patrol provided additional security, as well as the Lockheed security personnel and a lot of logistics people and mechanics. It was just an amazing effort. They had to get going early in the morning, before sunrise, because it was going to take hours and, in fact, a few days of travel to get to Nevada. So the convoy worked its way up alongside what's now, well, I don't think it was Highway 5 yet, but it is now, and it took it up through Gorman and eventually over to the desert and across to the east through the town of Baker, and then north through Shoshone near Death Valley Junction, and eventually entering into Nevada, where the California Highway Patrol handed it off to the Nevada Highway Patrol. And they escorted the convoy to the boundaries of the Nevada test site. And from there, the convoy worked its way up through the test site up to Area 51, where the crates were broken down and the airframes removed, and then finally assembled to their final configuration and the engines installed, and they're ready for ground and flight testing.
Yeah, and I think of course, these were huge crates. There's a lot of pictures. I think Linda posted the link already to some photos and a story that actually A-12 pilot Frank Murray wrote about how they got to Area 51, how these airframes got there. With a lot of pictures, you can see this is a flatbed truck with overhanging on both sides. I mean, they had to shut down the entire highway, cut down signs, highway signs to some degree, make them kind of add hinges to them. So every time they came through, they just laid it flat and then put it back up. And I think wasn't there a story at one point where they had an encounter with a school bus, that they hit a school bus and they um, pretty much just gave or maybe a tour bus, some kind of bus, and they just
I'm trying to remember if that was the A-12 or the X-15, which is another interesting story. One of those, I know there was an incident, and I do know that on one of the convoys, the vehicle carrying the larger crate ran off the road a little bit and got stuck in the dirt, and they had to dig that out and get it pulled back onto the roadway again. What's really amazing is they did this with each and every airframe, and before that, even before they got to that, they took the full-scale A-12 radar model from Burbank out to Groom Lake to do the RCS testing, the radar signature testing, in preparation for the actual aircraft. But all of those airplanes had to be delivered. The fleet of A-12s, the YF-12A interceptor prototypes, the M21 motherships, and then even the D-21s, which are much smaller, had their own separate crates that were also taken out.
Yeah, and that's all happened in total. Nobody really cared about it. I mean, people saw that, and I don't know if it's a true story. I heard that somewhere during the transport, a kid asked one of the accompanying police officers, "What's in that crate?" And he just said, "Oh, the UFO." And that shut it down right there. So, but for the most part, people back then weren't they didn't even. Probably most people that saw these things didn't even know where they came from, where they went, what their purpose was. It was just a big crate, could have been mining equipment, some other huge pieces of equipment. They had no idea that this was a high-tech aircraft that was on its way to a high-tech testing facility.
Right. It could have been anything. And this was at a time when you didn't have people with cell phones and the internet and things to spread pictures of it all around like you do now with like when they moved the X-47B test aircraft, the unmanned combat air vehicle prototypes from Edwards Air Force Base back east for testing at Patuxent River, Maryland. And people would see this strange shape all wrapped up on the back of a truck, and they say, "Oh, it looks like a flying saucer," because the wings had been taken off, and it looked really strange. And of course, now, you got the cell phone videos, and they go online, it goes viral. So it's a different world.
Yeah, I mean, can you even imagine if somebody back then would have live streamed those transports, the stories that would have come up? And these were highly specialized vehicles. There's actually that incident where they ran off the road. I think that is documented in photos in Frank's story.
Yes.
And you can see that there's actually steering cabins in the back of the flatbed, steering the back of it to really make it around turns and whatnot. And you can see how that guy is like almost buried in the dirt there trying to get that thing back out. It must have been a brutal test. I mean, anybody who has ever gotten their car stuck in the dust, in the dirt, you can imagine getting I don't know how many tons of transport stuck in the dirt. I mean, it must have been, oh no, what do we do now?
And when you look at those specialized vehicles, I mean, that was a real feat of engineering to do that. That was very, very clever.
Yeah, really. So if you want to know more about that story. It's a really interesting story. It's in the link. Linda has already posted it. It's also all the links that I'm going to mention are also in the description to the video. So if you miss the link in the chat, just look it up. There's all kinds of links in the description to the video to what we're going to talk about today. Frank's really done a great job documenting that. And again, Frank is one of the pilots who ended up flying these things. So, who better to talk about how they got to Area 51 than one of the actual pilots?
He was a very interesting guy. I liked Frank a lot. And I must say I owe a debt of gratitude to all of the roadrunners who welcomed me in and told me their stories. And Frank certainly did a lot of that, and I'm glad he made a great effort to help preserve that history.
He did, yeah. And there's a lot of his stories on the Roadrunners website. The link that Linda posted is to a subpage on the Roadrunners website. If you go to the main page, roadrunnersinternational.com, there is more than you will ever want to know about those days. Stories by the Roadrunners. The Roadrunners were the people that worked on these projects back then. I can probably say the men. I don't think there were any women in those days.
Right.
But these are stories from their day-to-day operations. That was their daily life, and they have all of that documented on the Roadrunners website. That I have the great honor of running for them moving forward. And it's just amazing, these stories. Like there's one story about how they had a parasail or parachuting exercise at Lake Mead that apparently went sideways a little bit and people almost drowned, and all kinds of little behind the scenes stories. So check it out. And a lot of those stories are in the war stories section of that page, and there's sections for the A-12, for the U-2, and for Groom Lake in itself. Lots of pictures of the olden days at Area 51. And one of the things that they were dealing with were, I think, the flight suits that they needed on these missions. The A-12 was not pressurized, so they needed a pressurized suit, and especially if they had to get out at great altitude, which has happened, they
Sure.
needed a pressure suit.
Because if they were doing what would be for that aircraft considered relatively low altitude, say up to 50,000 feet, they could wear a standard flight suit with an oxygen mask and that sort of thing. But for the operational altitudes, they were looking at up above 60,000 feet, above 70,000 feet, above 80,000 feet, up to 90,000 feet. They needed a full pressure suit. So essentially, it was like a spacesuit. That's just exactly what it was, and it protected them. They were hooked up to air conditioning units that could regulate the temperature, because you had the combination of extremely cold temperatures at high altitude, but then extreme heating generated by the aerodynamic friction of the aircraft as it flew through that upper atmosphere. I mean, it got hundreds and hundreds of degrees, and even up to 1,000 degrees in some places on the airframe. So it was a very hostile environment. It was above most of the sensible atmosphere. They were, if you were to be exposed to that as a human body at those altitudes, your blood would boil. I mean, it's just not the kind of place where a human being could normally live. So you had this special suit with all the gear hooked up into the life support system in the aircraft, and that's what kept these guys alive. You were talking about the exercise at Lake Mead with the parasail. Well, one of the things they had to do for training for operational missions was planning for the possibility of water survival. What if they had to bail out and land in the water? And so at Lake Mead, they'd take these pilots out and use a boat and a parasail to lift them up, and then let them parachute down into the water to practice survival exercises. There were a few attempts to do this wearing that full pressure suit. And there's a picture in my book that shows one of the pilots I I don't think they did a lot of that at Lake Mead because indeed somebody almost drowned. It was not a good situation. They did some additional practice that was more controlled in the swimming pool at Area 51. And I've got a picture of Ken Collins doing that with the full suit where he's suspended from a harness over the swimming pool and the life support guys off to the side.
That was probably a little more controlled environment, but
Yeah.
the way I heard the story is they went out, oh, we're going partying at Lake Mead and party, and then it went sideways pretty quick, and they, I think they only did that one time, and
Yeah.
then uh, didn't do that again. And I can only imagine. I mean, if getting out of one of these planes at high altitude and coming down, we're going to talk about some of the accidents in a minute here. That's a thing onto itself. But then, coming down and landing in the water, struggling to get out of your suit, struggling for the parachute not to drag you down. That's a whole nother can of worms. And these
Well,
guys were just trained to deal with any eventualities.
right. And that training did pay off to some degree. There was an accident involving one of the M21 motherships with a D-21 drone that collided with the mothership during launch. And the two-man crew of that aircraft had to eject at high altitude, and they were over the Pacific Ocean. And the pilot, fortunately, was able to use all his training, and he survived, and he got into his raft, and he was okay. But the launch control officer may have been injured during bailout, or maybe his suit was damaged or something, but he ended up drowning in the ocean. But that was a real world incident that showed that it was worthwhile to do that kind of training to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, his suit might have been damaged, so there was probably nothing he could even do to, even
Yeah.
if he was conscious. I mean, there's other accidents. We're going to talk about that later, where the pilot was semi-conscious after he got out. And these guys were pushing the envelope, and they uh, go where, to use an old Star Trek theme, where no man has gone before. And things sometimes went sideways and they had to deal with it. And sometimes they just weren't, it went sideways so quick that they just couldn't deal with it in time to prevent a tragedy. And uh, before we get into that, let me thank Miller Van Dort TV for his donation, $20. Thank you very much for your support. And great stories, Peter Merlin and Jörg Arnoux. Really appreciate you guys keeping this history alive. We appreciate you listening to us, to absorbing these stories and carrying them forward to the next generation. That's why we're doing this. And in that context, maybe it is appropriate to talk about some of the accidents and some of the people that one of them made it, one of them didn't make it, and so
Sure. So I
let's
suppose,
talk about. Go ahead.
yeah, I suppose I should probably begin with the Ken Collins mishap in May of 1963. At that time, the A-12 was still very much in the early stages of flight testing. They had not yet equipped the aircraft with the J-58 turbojet engines. Instead, it had the J-75 turbojets. So it was not yet capable of Mach 3 flight. So during that period, a lot of testing and training went into just studying the basic handling qualities of the aircraft, proving the navigation systems, testing the propulsion systems and avionics and things like that. So on this one flight, Ken Collins, who was one of the CIA pilots for Oxcart, was doing a training flight outside of the Nevada ranges. So that took him into areas where he was no longer within the severely controlled airspace of what we now call the Nevada Test and Training Range. And during one leg of the flight, he was approaching Wendover, Utah. Well, it's Utah and Nevada. It's right on the state line. And there were clouds. He was flying in clouds and losing visibility. But most important, Ken suddenly realized he was having some erroneous airspeed readings. And he knew something was wrong, wasn't quite sure what it was. And all of a sudden, he found himself upside down in the clouds. And his aircraft was spinning out of control. And he was ultimately forced to eject. It was a low altitude training flight, so he had a regular flight suit on, not a pressure suit. And he bailed out of the aircraft, and his parachute opened up, and he saw the plane crash, and came down in the desert. And then he wondered, well, now what do I do? He's in the middle of nowhere, and his airplane is burning off in the distance. And this is at a time when you have to understand, the A-12 was an unacknowledged special access program. This was a black program. It was highly top secret, and no one outside of the program personnel were supposed to know about it. And here he's crashed on public land. And as it turns out, it was not too far from the town of Wendover, about 14 miles, and several miles from the nearest highway. And turns out some guys had been driving along in a pickup truck on the highway, and they saw this crash. They saw the pilot coming down, so they drove across the desert and offered Ken a ride. And Ken said, "Great, thanks. I need to get to the nearest highway patrol station so I can call my base." So they took him back down to the highway, and a highway patrolman happened to be passing, and they ended up going to Wendover. And so Ken called in to Area 51 and explained that, yes, he'd crashed, but he's still alive. And here's where the plane is. And so there was a huge response at that point from Area 51, a lot of aircraft, a lot of ground vehicles and personnel coming to secure the scene and recover the debris. And there was a lot of talk at CIA headquarters about what to do. They were afraid that someone unauthorized might see this aircraft out in the desert and learn something about it. And they thought maybe they should just dynamite it, just blow it up in place. They ended up not doing that. But it was true that the cleanup and recovery absolutely superseded the accident investigation. They figured, hey, the pilot's alive. He can tell us what went wrong. And we'll learn a lot more from him than by digging through the wreckage. So they spent, I don't know, a week or so, however long it was, collecting the wreckage, boxing it up, and taking it back to Area 51. And there was
Wasn't there also a story that they told these people, or that Ken told these people when they picked him up, don't go there, there's radiation or some kind of a danger there, to just prevent them from going there, checking it out?
Now it's time for me to be a myth buster. Ken dined out on this story for decades, and he always used to tell people a number of things. The first thing was, he said that these guys showed up in the pickup truck and that they said, hey, do you want to go to the crash site? You want us to take you to the airplane? And he claimed that he said, it's a fighter plane, there's a nuclear weapon on board, and that got them all, excited and afraid, and they didn't want to go near it. I do not believe that Ken ever told them that. See, Ken kept very detailed notes after he was taken to the highway patrol station in Wendover, and he wrote down everything that he did and said and things like that, and he makes no mention of that, which is one thing. But also, more to the point, I think if he had told these guys that there was a nuclear weapon on board, that the guys would have gone home and they'd go to the bar later and they'd be telling people, oh my God, we were at this crash site and there was a nuclear weapon on board. And then it would have been big news everywhere. So I don't think he did that. I think he was smart enough not to do that. Another thing that Ken always talked about when he told the story is that when the CIA interviewed him afterwards to get his description of what had happened. He always told the story saying that he was injected with sodium pentothal, truth serum, to make sure that he told, the truth about everything like that. I understand why he said that, because if you think about something that you might be injected with to testify about something, truth serum is the first thing that comes to mind. Everybody, well, maybe not everybody. In my day, everybody seemed to know about sodium pentothal and what that is. What they actually injected him with was sodium amytal. And this is described in detail in the declassified accident report from the CIA. Sodium amytal is a similar compound, but instead of being used to force people to tell the truth, it's used to recover memories from people who have been through a traumatic experience. So
Okay.
that's an easy detail to get wrong, especially years later if you're remembering it. And so I don't blame him for that, but I did correct all this stuff in my book, so I've got a more factual account of that.
Well, that actually makes a lot more sense, I would say, because I mean, injecting him with the truth serum would almost indicate that they didn't trust him. Injecting him with something that helps his memory makes a lot more sense, actually, in that
Sure,
context.
right, because he was a fully vetted member of that team and all that. So yeah. So the so an interesting thing about this, when you think about it, this aircraft, this mysterious secret aircraft, comes plummeting out of the sky, and it crashes in the desert, a semi-rural area. It's not far from a town, Wendover. There were civilian witnesses, the guys in the truck. There was also a reporter who tried to fly over the scene, get some pictures. And then the government forces, they come in real quick, real hard. They establish secure perimeter. They take control of the site for as long as they need to. Cleanup is top priority. They also talk to the witnesses, telling them, don't talk about what you've seen. The reporter who claimed to have pictures, they had him turn the pictures over to them, confiscated his film. And then they cleaned up the site and they left. And so what does this sound like? It sounds like a UFO crash retrieval story. It is absolutely a classic UFO crash retrieval story. Except in this case, we now have, decades later, the accident report is declassified, the photos of the scene are declassified, the program's declassified. So, Ken Collins was able to talk publicly about what had happened, as were other people who worked on the project. Interestingly, there was a top secret memo at the time that was sent from the on-scene commander to project headquarters, CIA, saying, we have completed our work at the crash site and all traces of the aircraft have been removed from the scene, boxed up and returned to the base. All traces, which also sounds like a UFO crash retrieval story. All traces are gone. I eventually found the site, and I can tell you that not all traces of the aircraft were missing from the scene. This is a nice piece of titanium skin. If you look at pictures of the aircraft, the historic photos, this is from a time when the A-12 had not been painted completely black. It was largely natural metal, except certain areas were light gray, where they painted national insignia and Air Force insignia and things like that. And I
That's a
found
pretty
many
good sized
pieces.
chunk.
Yeah, and I found many pieces out there. Quite a few of them had part numbers and manufacturer's inspection stamps. And some of them were absolutely identifiable as being part of an A-12. You can compare them to an airplane in a museum today and see that. You can compare them to photos that have been released and technical manuals. And I also found, remember I said that the airplane was early enough in the program, they were using the J-75 engines, not the J-58. I did find engine parts, and from those part numbers compared to a J-75 engine parts booklet, I was able to identify them as well. So all of that fits, and it's a positively identified crash site. In fact, interestingly, the airplane hit flat and sort of left an impression of the shape of the rear fuselage and wings and engine nacelle. So you can still kind of see that today.
Wow. How many years afterwards? 50 plus years later,
Well,
you can
right. That
still see
was
it.
right. I mean, it crashed in 1963. I was there in 2003. So a lot of
So
time,
40 years
a lot of
later.
time passing. Yeah.
That's amazing. And that also confirms your saying that there is always something left behind, no matter how they clean it up. So, I mean, that is amazing. A chunk like that, you would think that they would have gone over. Does titanium register on a metal detector? Probably, if they would
Oh,
have gone
yes,
over it.
absolutely. Yes, it sure does. Right.
Yeah, so they could have found it with a metal detector. And, makes you wonder why. I mean, those things must have existed back then.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
But another thing, what you said, I was thinking about that. If this happened today, there would have been your next UFO story. There would have been all kinds of YouTubers, influencers out there with their cameras
Right.
documenting it, and next thing you know, there's a UFO crash. I mean, some of the media made a UFO crash out of the drone that crashed here last fall.
Right.
So,
Yes,
uh,
exactly.
totally. And by the way, Linda already posted the link to your great article about this on the Dreamland Resort website. It's a
Oh, okay,
several
great.
part article about how this came about, why it happened, and your efforts to recover material, and also a lot of, I think this crash and a lot of other crashes are also documented on your X Hunters website for people that are interested in aviation archaeology, I think you called it.
Right.
Go to the X Hunters. I don't think I sent that link to Linda, so she won't have it. Let me just post that real quick here. Whoops. There it is, the X Hunters website. There's this and a lot of other crashes documented on that. And your hunt for the crash sites is
Right.
documented on that website. Also a great website. And then there was another crash out of Area 51, Walt Ray, and that didn't quite end up so fortunate with the pilot surviving.
Right. That was in January 1967. And Walt Ray was one of the shortest of the pilots, and he found sitting in that seat with his pressure suit to be fairly uncomfortable. So he arranged to have a custom-made extension for his headrest, and that made his seat a little more comfortable. But unfortunately, that came back to bite him later. During one of his training flights, he encountered a situation where he didn't have as much fuel as he thought he had, and he realized that he was in trouble, and he missed one opportunity to possibly divert to a different Air Force base. And so he decided he was going to try to make it to Area 51, and he ran out of fuel about 70 miles short and was forced to eject. But because of that headrest extension, he was unable to separate from his seat, and he was stuck in the seat and rode it all the way down, and his parachute never opened. So he died in the course of that, which is just really unfortunate. It was a tragedy. The airplane continued on and crashed about 10 miles away from where he was. And I helped Tom Mahood go looking for that site a few times. Tom had started that search, and we roamed all over the desert looking for that. And eventually he did find it. And then I went there later and visited the site. This is a piece of that airplane.
Wow.
Now you can see that it's got the black paint, the classic blackbird colors that you expect to see. So
Nice.
yeah, it was certainly interesting to go hunting for that site. And again, that was another story where this is still it was a black project, totally top secret. And so when this plane went down, Lockheed and the Air Force worked together to put out a cover story. And the Air Force decided on calling it an experimental model of the SR-71, which wasn't strictly true, but it's close enough. Because the SR-71 was not as classified. That was a well-known aircraft. It had been unveiled in 1964, so people knew what that was. Kelly Johnson of Lockheed was not totally thrilled with that cover story, but he went with it, and that's fine. There, was still a lot of mystery around it. The people living in the local area, were told to stay away, not talk about it. A guy who used to drive his cattle through there was told he couldn't do that while they were cleaning up the site. And the news media kind of got wind of the fact that this was something unusual in the amount of secrecy and security that was surrounding it. But they spent a number of weeks cleaning up the site, and eventually the weather just got really bad, and they gave up on it. And once again, it's one of these situations where it's a crash out in the desert, and the stuff is spread out over a wide area, and so there's still bits and pieces to be found in the middle of nowhere.
Well, apparently pretty large chunks were still to be found.
Some of
I
them
remember
are.
when
That's true.
Jeremy and his companions went out there, and when I saw the photo of this huge piece of paneling that they found,
Yes.
I
Yes.
said, "No, that's got to be a fake. There's just no way. It's for real. They actually
Oh yeah.
found a
Yeah.
piece
No,
of
it's
that
sure.
aircraft."
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, this is the crash site. Tom Mahood, I think Linda just posted the link to Tom's article on the Dreamland Resort website that he was kind enough to let me use. Great article. Tom also writes in a very funny way, in a very entertaining way, his hunt for 928. He sunk his truck in the process, I believe, and all kinds of
He sure
interesting
did.
things.
Yes.
So it's a
It
very
was.
entertaining article to read.
Yeah. Tom was pretty obsessed with finding it. He was really anxious to do that. I helped him on a few occasions. We interviewed people. We walked miles and miles in the desert. He kept going back again and again. The incident where he drove through a puddle on one of the dirt roads and turned out to be a lot deeper than he expected. So he got his truck stuck, and yeah, just wild stuff. I mean, just the searches for these things always are an adventure in themselves.
Absolutely. And in this particular case, I'm just trying to find the link to it. I did not send that to Linda so she can post it. The crash site where Walter Ray ended up is actually across the valley on the other
Right,
side of the valley. And
right,
uh, Jeremy and his crew, they actually set up a memorial at that site.
right.
Let's see if I can find that here. Yeah, here it is. That's Oh, it's actually, look at that. It's actually on. No, that's the U2 crash site. I'm going to have to put it in the description. Uh, that is the memorial that Jeremy and his crew put up for Walter Ray at the site where he came down, unfortunately, still strapped into the ejection seat. And it's a beautiful memorial. It's a little hard to get to, but it's definitely worth exploring. I have several trip reports on my Dreamland Resort website of people that made it there, and I think Jeremy and his gang actually recently went back up there to do some maintenance. So he's done
Yeah,
a great job preserving the legacy of these guys that did these things and sometimes didn't survive.
right. And of course, Walter Ray was a CIA pilot, and he's also memorialized on the Wall of Honor at CIA headquarters and the Book of Honor, which is in front of the wall monument. I've had an opportunity to visit that memorial in the lobby of the CIA headquarters building in Langley, Virginia. Um, and it's really sobering to look at that, all the black stars on the against the white marble and the names inscribed in the Book of Honor, and also the stars in the Book of Honor that have no names next to them because the names have not been declassified. So, yeah, a lot of our nation's defenders work in clandestine service and don't get public recognition all the time.
That's absolutely correct, and they probably couldn't even, uh, not let alone tell the public. But I don't know if they even told his wife exactly
Right.
what happened. Probably she got some kind of cover story too,
Yeah.
and I think I've read it somewhere. Just my memory is not that good that I would remember exactly what they told her. But that's the thing; these guys gave everything for their country, and in some cases, it was never recognized, or years and decades later.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of situation where one of these guys would die in an accident like this, and they'd have a funeral for him, and then they'd tell his buddies, "Hey, don't show up in uniform. Don't, if you're going to be at the funeral, don't wear your uniform, or don't wear anything to identify you with the program or things like that." And it was a strange kind of lifestyle to live there, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think with that, we're going to see there's already some questions in the stream before it gets too late. I don't want to run short on
Right.
time for the
Sure.
questions.
Yeah. Let's
We still have some talking points. We're going to keep them for next month. If you're up for it, we'll do
Sure.
another stream next month, the usual time. It may actually be, I'm going to have to look at it, it may be on a Saturday instead of Friday, but
Okay.
I'll post the correct date in the stream. So with that, I know there's already been questions. If you have questions for Peter, please post them again. I was not able to follow the stream, so go ahead and post your questions for Peter, and I'm going to basically read them to him, and hopefully I know he'll be able to answer them. I have no doubt about that. He is a walking encyclopedia. It's absolutely amazing. And again, I mean, Peter, how you structured your book, how you laid it all out, how you made it flow is just absolutely fantastic.
Well, I have to say that about the first 5 chapters, it was really easy to keep a chronological storyline, but then you start getting into overlapping projects, and it became easier to talk on a project by project basis rather than trying to keep it all chronological, because there was just too much overlap, too many different things happening all together.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. There's at any given time more than one project going on in Area 51, and it overlaps. We already talked a little bit about the foreign technology exploitation. Maybe we'll get a little more into that. All right, here we have a question from Shepard Johnson, VA. Peter, did you visit the SR-71 crash site south of Las Vegas, New Mexico? What did it look like?
I did visit that once, as a matter of fact. I'm not the first person to have gone looking for that one. There was another gentleman who had been there before me, and it is essentially out in the middle of a vast cow pasture. There was not much to see, little bits and pieces of titanium and other materials scattered on the ground, but it was there, and it's one of a number of SR-71 crash sites that I visited. It's certainly interesting to go there. I think on that same trip, I also went to the one in eastern New Mexico, where the plane broke apart at high altitude and high speed, and the pilot found himself outdoors at like 70,000 feet and Mach 3, and wasn't entirely sure how he got there because he never ejected. Fortunately, his parachute opened up and he landed okay, but his backseater died in the mishap. Of the 50 Blackbirds of all different kind of models that were made, the A-12s, the YF-12s, the M-21s, the SR-71s, I think about 20 of them crashed. Not one single one was lost to enemy fire, though, so that's impressive.
That's right, yeah. And we have all the crashes on the Roadrunner's website, every single airframe that crashed. There was one story, I believe, was it Ken Collins or one of the pilots in Kadena that ended up with a piece of shrapnel in his embedded in his aircraft after a mission where they
Right. And
shot at him.
I mentioned that in my book, and I've got a photograph of the souvenir that was made, the piece of titanium with the hole in it, and also the piece of shrapnel that was pulled out of it. It was from a surface-to-air missile, I think an SA-2, that got just close enough that when it exploded, a little piece hit the A-12. Only time that an A-12 was hit by enemy fire, didn't do a lot of damage, but enough to to give them a little bit of a wake-up call. Between the altitude that the aircraft could fly at, the speed above Mach 3, more than 2,100 miles per hour, and the fact that they had all kinds of defensive avionics, jamming equipment, things to make the enemy missiles go off in the wrong direction, stuff like that. That's what protected those crews on board during their mission.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure that was a huge wake up call when you're getting
Oh yeah,
shot at, and you might
sure,
even feel the impact of a piece of shrapnel
right.
on your aircraft. Wow, I can't even imagine. Okay, Colin Traveler has a question for you, and I think that's a really interesting one. I'm interested in if you can answer that. Peter, what in your view is the operational cost of Groom, and how many defense companies have facilities there as well?
Yeah, you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. I have some general statistics on that in my book as far as some of the budgets that went into that. Um, it's essentially, I mean, you look at, say, Edwards Air Force Base in California, and this is like almost a mirror of that, except in the black world. You got multiple runways, a vast complex of hangars and support facilities and dormitories and all the infrastructure needed to have some 2,500 people working there. And you've got about, say, 500 uniformed military and military civil service. And then you've got around 2,000 contractors. And the number of personnel, varies a little bit depending on how many projects are going on. At any given time, you'll have more or fewer people. And it's a day and night operation. A lot of the test activity is taking place at night. You can just look at the commuter flights going in there, for instance, the fleet of 737s taking off out of Las Vegas on a daily basis, and one after the other, hour after hour, taking people up, bringing people back. It's multiple shifts, and you've got representatives of pretty much all the major aerospace companies, like you'd expect: Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, RTX, used to be Raytheon, and so on and so forth, and lots of other subcontractors. So it's really quite a substantial operation. Very expensive to keep going, but it's unique, a unique asset within the military complex. So the Air Force and the Navy and all these military organizations, they operate a massive test facility base that you can see elements of all across the country, and this is part of that, which fits within the Nevada Test and Training Range. You've got the Utah Test and Training Range nearby, the training ranges in California, the Pacific Range, and all of these are interlinked with instrumentation and communications, and so the aircraft are using different parts of them for different things. So it's a lot.
Yeah, and that's really I often get the story. Well, Area 51 has moved. It's no longer there. It's not going anywhere, as we both know. The infrastructure in the entire NTS and NTDR is so unique. And then, as you just said, it's connected to the Utah training range and also to the Edwards 2508 airspace. There's bridges in between these airspaces now, and the channel members I did a stream just for channel members where I'm explaining these airspaces, how they are connected. It's basically one big happy family now with all the three airspaces. Fallon kind of fits into that match too. So it's just not. I'm sure there are facilities similar to Area 51 in other parts. I think there's a lot of stuff going on in Alaska that nobody wants us to know about. But Area 51 just, we both know that is not going anywhere. Colin has another question here. In what year did you learn of the Russian jets based there? The
I
redheads.
right. I probably first heard about that around 1981, I think. There was a photograph of a MiG-21 in U.S. Air Force markings. It was published in Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine. And I remember seeing that, and I was pretty excited because I thought, wow, we have Russian fighter planes. That's really neat. And it said there was a whole squadron of these things operating out in Nevada. And sometime after that, I took a tour at Edwards Air Force Base, and we visited the test pilot school. And I am, of course, I always have to be that guy. So I asked our tour guide, hey, I said I saw this picture of the Russian fighter plane and U.S. markings. What's that all about? And he said, I don't know anything about it, and if I did, I couldn't talk about it. so,
Yeah.
so that was the end of that conversation.
Yeah.
It's
Well, back in those
interesting.
days, that was a
Yeah,
super, super secret
sure,
project.
right. Absolutely. That was even long before the Red Eagles were declassified, and so yeah, that was at a time when that was indeed very secret. And what's interesting now, looking at that picture of the MiG-21, because I include that in my book, is I now can see that the picture was taken directly over Groom Lake. And I can tell that because in the background, you can see Whitesides Hill, and I think even Tickaboo Peak may be visible in the distance.
Huh. Wow. So, but of course, nobody would have, or very few people would have known those landmarks in those
Right,
days.
right.
But interesting, and I think the reason why it was so classified was, for one thing, obviously we didn't want the Russians to know that we are tinkering with their aircraft, and then how did we get them? That was a whole probably deeply illegal operation in itself. So we
That
just
was
didn't want
that
to
was
be.
that was always kind of the biggest part of the secrecy was where we got the planes. Interesting thing, the first Russian plane that was tested at Area 51 was a MiG-21. It was Project Have Donut in 1968. And the lessons learned from that, flying it against all the U.S. combat aircraft, were put into a training film that was then shared with frontline fighter pilots. And you might ask, well, okay, if you're sharing that information with so many people, how do you keep it a secret? And the short answer is you kind of don't. It's going to leak out, and it did because by the time the next MiG project was rolling around, 1969, Aviation Week was already reporting about the MiG-21. They just had a short blurb in the magazine saying that this testing had taken place or was taking place. And so that was kind of the first leak into the public world of what was going on there with that.
Yeah, but of course they didn't go into details in
Right.
about how did we get it.
Sure.
Uh, so next question from Shepard Johnson again. How and where were the KC-135 based for Oxcart and Blackbird refueling operations?
Oh, those were, I think those were at Beale Air Force Base, actually. I think it was the 456 Strategic Wing or something. I've got a patch for it somewhere. There were a couple different wings and squadrons that were involved, but Beale Air Force Base supported a lot of the early testing with tankers. They had KC-135Q model, which was modified to take the JP-7 fuel that was used for the Blackbirds, and so they supported first the A-12s and later the SR-71s.
Okay, and that's when they were flying their missions later on. Well, were they did they ever fly missions from here over Europe or over Russia? I don't think they did. They flew from
They
Kadena. We're going to talk about the next time. Uh,
Right. There were operations, for the A-12. All the stuff was done out of Kadena
yeah,
for reconnaissance flights over Southeast Asia and North Korea. And then later the SR-71s moved into Kadena for that theater of operations.
right.
There were also deployments of the SR-71 to England that were used for reconnaissance flights over Eastern Europe and the Middle East and things like that. So yeah, a lot of worldwide deployments, and as you might imagine, that had a giant logistical footprint with tankers and other kinds of support.
Yeah, I remember seeing maps on the Roadrunners website where they have actual refueling points on their tracks that they were
Yeah.
flying and so forth. Uh, so that like I said, that is a whole logistical nightmare to even get all that organized. The next question from Gary, a longtime member with Dreamland Resort and a channel member. Peter, what's your opinion on how fast China seems to be able to develop and build next generation aircraft? Do you think the United States is falling behind China?
Um, Short answer to that second part is I do not think we're falling behind. Certainly, the People's Republic of China is developing a lot of stuff very rapidly. Um, they have some of their technology. You can clearly see where they've borrowed from Russian technology, from US technology, from European technology, and then adapted it to their own industrial base and technology base. And they've come up with some really quite interesting and unique fighter and bomber type aircraft lately. I don't know what the performance is like, but we've seen some photos and videos of those planes being tested. Um, they're certainly getting a much more modern force than they had in the not too distant past. And so China is truly the pacing threat that we're looking at primarily. That used to be the Soviet Union, led by Russia. Uh, Russia is still a significant threat, but not as much. I think China's the one to watch,
Mm-hmm.
and they China has been playing the long game, and they're good at that. They're very good, and they're not just working on military stuff. They're working on developing relations with other countries, um, with supporting, economically and trade agreements and a lot of other different things too. So, it's not just military things that we have to worry about. And of course, there's a whole new realm of cyber warfare and
Mm-hmm.
technological warfare that's just changing everything. And AI, artificial intelligence, certainly playing into that role.
Yeah, and I always look at it. Uh, China, they have their marching orders and they're marching in that direction. Whereas our policies change every few years, every election they might
Yeah,
change. So that's
sure.
the thing they have an advantage over us. They march their direction and they have their 100-year plan or whatever, and they're getting pretty good at that. And that's I would agree with you. They are not getting ahead of us, but we got to watch it,
Right.
and we got to be careful. Uh,
Historically speaking, the U.S. has always had a technological edge over pretty much any adversary. But the adversaries frequently have a lot of money that they dump into their buildup of military hardware, and so they produce in numbers where we're producing finer equipment.
yeah, and then they get the building plans and they build it cheaper and
Yeah,
better.
sure.
So, anyway, okay. Now this next question is little bit loaded. If you want to pass on it, that's fine. From Hillhurst, I'm guessing you've heard off the records conversation with former Area 51 employees what is the wildest story any of them has ever told you?
The wildest story anyone's ever told me about Area 51, you mean?
Area 51 employees, yeah. So obviously we don't want to talk about anything classified, although we don't know
Right.
anything
Sure.
classified, just to make sure
Right.
that the FBI understands that.
Um, yes. No. There, there, there have been a lot of people that I've met who actually worked at Area 51 in all different capacities, um, from engineers to technicians, to aircraft maintainers, engineers, pilots, security personnel, medical, base commanders, and administrative personnel. Uh, People who worked on the Janet flights, and there are lots of stories. I've included quite a few of them in the book. Um, the wildest stories mostly revolve around alcohol because these folks were kind of living out in the Wild West, as it were, without any adult supervision. It's gotten better, and I don't know if the culture probably changes from time to time depending on the current commander and how strict they are. There was a time when they used to get pretty wild, and they'd throw very wild parties after successful first flights or completing a project or things like that. And some of those stories are pretty crazy. And
Well, work hard, play hard. That's the thing back
it's
then.
right. And I've included some of those in the book, in all fairness, because you have to talk about the culture.
Mhm.
And it got to a point where it was such a problem that a new Air Force commander came in and said, "Hey, we got to clean this up a little and try to bring things to heel a bit," which was a smart thing to do. And maybe they've continued that. There have been uh, some things I did not include in the book because they didn't add to the story significantly, and they were a bit off color, let's say,
Okay.
and inappropriate. I certain things about a particular wing commander and his secretary, and I could name names, but I'm not going to do that. So it's there are some
Okay.
pretty wild stories, suffice it to say, and most of them were revolved around alcohol.
I think everybody's kind of getting the drift.
Yeah.
And the next question actually goes in the same direction, sort of, uh, from Zap Right, also a channel member. Peter, in speaking with former base employees, have they have they had any interesting stories of exploring the mining sites around Area 51, settlements around that time?
Yeah, that was actually one of the hobbies that a lot of people took up. Again, they're sitting there all week long, and when you have some free time, what are you going to do? Well, drinking is one thing. You can play pool, you can go swimming or play tennis or use some of the sporting things or the gymnasium. But some folks would check out a vehicle and they'd go off into the desert and explore some of the old mines. The biggest one, the most well known, of course, is the Groom Mine. But that was owned by the Sheehan family, and of course, they continued their ownership. They were not permanent residents there. They would go and visit from time to time. But no doubt there were workers from Area 51 who would trespass there occasionally, or also explore some of the other abandoned mines nearby. I do know that at the end, when the Sheehan family was forced out of their property, they did want to at least try to keep some of their old family heirlooms, keepsakes, and whatnot. And one of the things they had was a 200-pound anvil from the blacksmith shop at the Groom Mine, and that anvil disappeared. And the Air Force was never able to give them a satisfactory explanation, but I'm guessing somebody from the base probably went up there and said, "Hey, I'm going to take this anvil as a souvenir." So
Yeah,
uh,
probably. And I've
some
actually
of the
talked to
yeah, oh
Martha
no, go ahead.
Sheehan.
Yeah,
Uh, she's quite a character. She has some stories to tell. Um, we had talked about her being a guest on my live stream at some point. She's having some difficulties in the family right now. There's been an accident, and uh, so we kind of put that on the back burner. But I'm hoping to get her to get on the live stream. She has some stories to tell from those days when they had the mine and the increasing harassing when they wanted to get to their mine to the point where it was pretty clear that the military just wanted them out. And then, of course, eventually they lost the land in an eminent domain.
Right.
Uh,
I included that in the book as well because it's it's kind of it's kind of an integral story with the base because the Sheehan family were there before the base existed, and they had a an interesting relationship with trying to deal with the military and the government and trying to keep their land and the things that happened with the atomic fallout in the 1950s. And one time an Air Force plane shot up their mill. And I mean, it's just lots of different things.
yeah, Martha told me a few things. She wasn't taking any prisoners either, so she dealt it out right back. So good for them, and it's. I hope that we get to tell their story at some point.
Yeah.
Next question is for you from Zapright. Apparently, for me, have you done any collaboration with Steve Douglas of Deep Black Horizon? I have not. I've never met him, unfortunately. We've had email exchanges. I uh, I believe he lives in Texas, so we have never actually met. But that is not to say that we might do something in the future.
I've
Uh,
had some correspondence with him long in the past, and I think I may have actually seen him one time outside the airfield at Roswell, New Mexico. I think I parked next to him along the fence line. That was many years ago.
okay. Interesting. Yeah, that's I checked out that area many years ago and went to the supposed crash site and all that good stuff. So, uh, of course,
Well,
not
that
much to
was
see there.
right. That was something I did as well. My friend Tom, who you know, Tom and I, we drove to what used to be the old Foster Ranch and drove up to the ranch foreman's house to ask permission to go looking for this crash site. And so I knocked on the door, and this nice lady answered the door, and I said, "Hey, you don't know us, but we were wondering if we could wander around on part of your property." And she said, "Oh, you're looking for the UFO crash site?" It's like, "Yeah, yes, we are." So she said, "Yeah, well, you go down this road, and you'll see a little corral and a building." And so we did that, and I had always read stories about it and how there was supposedly this metallic foil from this, whatever it was. And so Tom and I wandered around the hills, and it's a terrible place to look for any kind of lightweight debris because it's all rolling hills and there's wind and the sheep graze down to the roots, so there's not a lot of ground cover. But I looked at the bushes and I looked in the few rocks I'd find, the sinkholes, and I wanted to find some of this metallic foil, right? I'd heard so many stories about it. And I looked into a crevice in the rocks and I saw metallic foil. So I
Huh.
reached down and I pulled out a TV dinner tray. So I put
Yeah,
it back.
well, for the next person to
That's
find.
that's all I
Yeah,
found. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting location. Of course, I mean, I think if you're dealing with Area 51, you have to at least make the trek down there once. Miller Van Dart TV comment. It's just a comment. That's exactly how the Chinese nationals that I know here in the U.S. describe the situation, confirming what we said.
Right.
His next comment, I'm not sure what. Maybe it means something to you. He says, "Bobby Lasers is definitely the wildest story." Bobby
Oh,
Lasers. I'm not.
maybe
Doesn't
talking
ring a
about Bob
bell.
Lazar. Probably talking about Bob Lazar.
Oh, Lazar. Bob Lazar. Of course.
Yeah. See,
Duh.
and that's a wild story, but I don't believe he ever worked there, so it doesn't really count as a story by
Yeah.
an Area 51 insider.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's a pretty good story, but that's all it is. Uh, Colin Traveler asked, did you ever speak to those employees who filed a lawsuit on contracting cancer working on the base?
I did talk to one employee who suffered health problems from exposure to the burning hazardous waste. Yeah, that was certainly a very tragic episode, and it brought a lot of public attention to Area 51 that had not previously happened before. A number of people filed class action lawsuits, and in the end, the government did not compensate them, which is sad because I kind of think they should have. And on the plus side, though, if you look at the satellite imagery of Area 51 that's been taken since the 1990s, and you can look at it year after year, you can see now where the area where the burn pits were, those trenches where they burned this hazardous waste, that area has been cleaned up. You can literally watch that happen in the satellite imagery. That was cleaned up and mitigated, and the landfill that they had is no longer close to the housing area. It's now been moved farther away, and they don't seem to be doing any burning of anything. And other places on base were contaminated with spills of fuels, oils, and lubricants and de-icing fluid. Some of the parking ramps have been dug up and the concrete replaced with new clean concrete. So, I think the results of that lawsuit are that the Air Force kind of became a better steward of the base and kind of worked a little harder to not expose people to hazardous substances, which if even if the original people didn't get paid off, at least future generations might not have to suffer like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's at least some benefit out of that. Let's see. Shepard Johnson says, I'll bet you anything that Anvil is at the Area 51 machine shop. He's probably right.
Maybe.
Uh, Colin Traveler, any thoughts on Skinwalker Ranch?
I have no knowledge of it whatsoever. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, yeah. I gotta admit, Lyndon, I watched the show, and it's entertaining, but you gotta take everything you see on that show with a huge grain of salt. I watch it for the entertainment factor. There may be something there, and Linda is a little more open to there being something there than I am. But the show makes a big circus out of it, and they are not doing, in my opinion, whatever is there any justice. That's my 2 cents. Shepard Johnson, VA, asks Peter, do you think the CIA explanation for UFOs being explained as SR 71 sightings has any legitimacy, or is it just the CIA making up stories?
Yeah, I think that there's some truth to it in that they talk about a CIA historian talked about how in the 1950s and 60s, almost half of UFO sightings were the result of these U-2 and A-12 flights. Because if you see these planes, they're flying at high altitude, much higher than an airliner. And if this takes place early in the morning or early in the evening, when the sun is low on the horizon or below the horizon, and the aircraft is way high up, it's catching the sun's rays from below the horizon, and it looks like this bright star-like object zipping across the sky at ridiculous speeds and altitudes. I'm sure that contributed to the number of sightings. I doubt that it was really half of all sightings. I think that's probably an exaggeration or an overgeneralization, but I certainly think that it had some contribution. I've certainly seen just airplanes under conditions like that where I can easily see how it would result in a UFO report.
And at the same time, the UFO stories were always a welcome distraction to, if somebody sees something classified high up there, oh, it's just UFO, don't worry about it. So
Right.
it goes both ways, I guess. And I had to chuckle Linda posted in the chat, Jörg watches it for the rocket factor, the Skinwalker range. They always shoot rocket in the sky for no apparent
Oh,
reasons. Big rockets, small rockets, a whole bunch of them. They do all kinds of drone formation flying. It's very entertaining, and I gotta admit I enjoy it for that. But I'm not taking it any. I'm not really taking it seriously as serious research what they're doing on that show.
well, and speaking of rockets, when I was growing up, I used to see a lot of missile and rocket launches out of Vandenberg Air Force Base. You could see them from Los Angeles, and there was never any mystery to that. But nowadays, anytime somebody sees a rocket launch out of Vandenberg, one of these SpaceX missions or whatever, people freak out and they say, "What is that? Is it a UFO? Is it a comet?" There's pictures and video on the net, and people don't know what they're looking at. And I'm not really sure whether it's just that we have uh, more people who don't know what it is are able to put their questions to a wider public than when I was young, or if more people now just don't know what these things are. People freak out just looking at airliners with contrails in the sky in the evening and morning.
Yeah, this is interesting story on that note. Uh, Pretty much what started my being on YouTube at all was a big German YouTuber who contacted me about doing a live stream from this area, and I went out with them to near Groom Lake Road and the highway, and we sat there watching the skies, and we're looking in almost darkness, but not complete darkness at the base, and all of this weird formation appears above the base, almost like a giant question mark in the sky. And I'm like, what the hell is this? This is all live streamed in this German YouTuber stream. And of course, it was a rocket launch. But
Yeah,
you go there, your mind is, your senses are heightened because you think you're going to see something. And this was only a couple of years ago, so it's been fairly recently. After me spending a lot of time here, I still, for a split second, fell victim to that illusion.
sure. And another example I can give is something like that. I was driving in northern Nevada one time at night, um, and this was probably just after sunset. It was getting dark, and my cell phone rang, and it was a friend in California, and he said, "Hey, are you watching the launch at Vandenberg?" Because normally I would have been at Vandenberg to watch some of these rockets go up. And I said, "Well, no, I'm on vacation. I'm traveling in Nevada." He says, "Well, there's a rocket. It's going to launch in about 5 minutes." Um, and here I am near Tonopah. I mean, I am way far away from Vandenberg, hundreds and hundreds of miles. And I thought, gee, I wonder if I'll be able to see it. So I pulled over to the side of the road and I waited. And sure enough, something starts coming up over the horizon, this bright glowing thing. And it suddenly puffs up into a big white ball glowing in the sky and looking really strange. And so I could see it even many hundreds of miles away from the launch site. It was visible. And I know that people in Phoenix, Arizona talk about seeing Vandenberg launches, or down in San Diego, I've seen them. So yeah, you can see that kind of thing from a long distance.
And in the right context, it does look very spooky.
It does.
This question from Colin Traveler, maybe you can make sense of it. Brown MT, I'm assuming mountain lights, brown mountain lights, you ever go to see them? I'm not familiar with brown mountain lights. Colin, maybe you can elaborate on what that is. Does it mean
That's
anything? Does it ring a bell?
that's not one that I know, although there are certain places in the U.S. where people have reported seeing strange lights, as the famous Marfa lights in Texas, and various other similar things like that. I'm not personally familiar with them, but I've kind of heard about
Yeah.
it a little bit.
Yeah, that's also another story that I hear a lot from people that came out here in the early '90s, including Chuck Clark told me this story. Who has spent a lot of time in this area is very familiar with phenomena here, with things you see here, of this light that is in the valley and jumps from point A to point B in a split second. I think there were probably deal playing with some laser deals,
Yeah.
uh, that kind of a thing. That's the only explanation I have for that. I have seen interesting things camped at the power lines overlook, and I saw power lines overlook is you don't have a view of Area 51, but you are probably to within 300 or 400 feet above ground from Area 51. It's an elevated spot, and from up there, years ago, for a while, I would see almost nightly these searchlights, for lack of a better word, just going around and around in the sky. And sometimes you could see them illuminating clouds. Something like you would see at a mall opening or at
Right.
in California, they have these to attract attention. I have no idea what they were, but I know I've seen them.
I will say that the strangest thing I've ever seen in the sky, without question, took place in Burbank, California, of all things. Now, my father had told me that he was seeing this strange phenomenon at night where there were some helicopters flying like in formation at night, and then in the middle between them, some strange bright red light. And I didn't know what he was talking about. I had no idea. So one evening, I happened to be in Toluca Lake, which is right near Burbank, and I heard helicopters and looked up, and there were lights from three helicopters. They, were all equidistant from one another, so it was like a triangle of helicopters in the sky, and they were just hovering in one place.
Hmm.
And I thought that's very strange. And then all of a sudden, right in the middle between them, this bright red light suddenly illuminated, and it had this sparkling, scintillating kind of look to it, like a laser. And to this day, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was something from the Lockheed plant, which is right nearby, or something completely different. I have no idea. It's a mystery to this day.
Interesting. Well, this would probably spark all kinds of UFO sightings, but among people.
Sure.
And we tend to look for, okay, what is the logical explanation? What could that be for Lockheed or for any of the contractor companies? What could they be doing? Nowadays, apparently, they do a lot of communications, experimenting with lasers for communication instead of radio waves. So I've heard people talk about lights that they see during these exercises, very bright flashes in the sky. Could be one of those laser experiments. Who knows what that is? I mean, you do
When,
see strange things, but
oh yeah,
you and I think we always look for, okay, what could it really be? What earthly explanation could there be?
when I lived in Lancaster, California, that's in the western end of the Mojave Desert. It's the Antelope Valley. And so you've got Air Force Plant 42 and Edwards Air Force Base right nearby. So there were always things flying around. And at night, I would often see some bright lights, usually two or three of them, that appeared to sit in the sky east of Palmdale, and they just looked like they hovered there, like they didn't move. But if you waited long enough, if you had the patience, you would see that they did seem to move very, very, very slowly. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And I'd see this night after night, uh, and I wondered what it was. And so eventually, I just waited and waited it out, and it turns out they were C-130s, C-130 Hercules cargo planes, special mission model of some kind, I think. But they would fly them at the lowest possible minimum airspeed to stay aloft to do whatever tests they were conducting. And there were usually two or three of these C-130s flying in trail, but they moved so slowly it was almost imperceptible when you're looking at it coming straight on. It just looked like a bright light hovering in the sky above Plant 42. Just crazy.
Yeah, like Lazar's lights over Area 51,
Yeah,
basically the Janet coming in with landing lights on,
yeah,
coming right at you. So it seems to almost
sure,
stand still, but not completely, and it can
yeah.
look very spooky. I've seen that myself. Uh, we're already at the 90-minute mark. We're going to wrap it up here in a minute. Let me
Okay.
just go through, see if there's any questions. Yeah, Linda just posted a few years ago, the Rachel gang, which is us, watched some lights in the sky that were not typical, but they were quite far away, so they can't really say what they were. UFO/UAP. I remember that. I almost forgot about that. It was the weirdest thing. Also, like you said, a light that one of us said, this light is moving. And we looked, yes, it's moving. And then, no, it's not moving anymore. Was it ever moving? Was it an illusion? I don't know. To this day, I don't know. So I think we pretty much got the questions covered here. If I skipped one of your questions, I apologize. We were aiming for an hour. We're already an hour and a half. So we're going to have to we'll continue this if Peter has time next month probably on a Saturday. So there's still, I'm looking at my list of talking points. We've still got a few things to cover about the A-12. For now, Peter, thank you so much for sharing all these great information with us.
No problem.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, to have you on the live stream, and I already look forward to the next stream. So thank you very much and have a great weekend.
Okay.
And with this, we go back to the other screen, and thank you all for joining today. I hope we didn't cut short one of your questions. There's always next time. Please remember your questions, post them. If you have questions in the meantime, you can always post them in the messages to this stream. I will respond to any questions asked in the messages, in the posts to any of the streams, to any of the videos. I read them all and I will respond to any questions there. So for next Friday, my special guest is T.D. Barnes, who has actually worked at Area 51. He'll be joining us on Friday at 6 p.m., next Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific. He's got some stories to tell along the lines of what Peter and I talked about a little bit. You know, what did they do in their off time? How was life at Area 51? He has lived it. He has worked there. So it'll be a very interesting stream next Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific. And then the following Friday, I'll do a members live stream for channel members. That's always a great opportunity to talk in a smaller group and really give some behind the scenes stuff. As channel member, you always get behind the scenes look and early access to new videos, and you, on top of that, support my work. So Linda has posted the link already. You can also go to the main page of this channel and hit the join button. Everyone's support is much appreciated, and I appreciate you all for tuning in today, for keeping us company, for your interest in the subject. Thanks for tuning in. You all have a great weekend, and please remember to like and subscribe. I hope to see you all next Friday, and here is our wonderful title music again.
30 years ago, he walked away, left Germany behind, built a life his way. Rachel, Nevada, dust and light, jets in the sky, no aliens inside. A hat in the wind, his pickup rolls, an iron will and a heart of gold. Dreamland Resort for 30 years strong, Area 51 is where he belongs. No hocus pocus, no fantasy, just hard cold facts, his legacy. keeps burning, it won't drown. A hat in the wind, his pickup rolls, an iron will and a heart of gold. Dreamland Resort for 30 years strong. Area 51 is where he belongs. No hocus pocus, no fantasy, just hard cold facts, his legacy. 30 years of dust, eyes on the truth, in truth he trusts. Dreamland Resort for 30 years strong. Area 51 is where he belongs. No hocus pocus, no fantasy, just hard cold facts, his legacy. Truth in the sky will guide till the end. No hocus pocus, no fantasy, just hard cold facts, his legacy. Support the man who brings the truth alive on Dreamland Resort, where freedom survives. Donate for jerk, he'll thank you true. He lives his dream, nothing breaks through.